The following program does not necessarily represent the views of the Trinity Broadcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Joy in Our Town. I'm Ann Farrell Tata, your host, and I am so excited to welcome my guest today, Scott Taylor. Scott is a member of the Virginia Delegate, House of Delegates in the 85th District representing Virginia Beach. And today we are going to be talking about economic issues that are facing Hampton Roads. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ann Farrell. It's great to be with you and your viewers, of course.
Well, can you talk a little bit about, I'm so proud of your background and I want the viewers to know about your background and then also how you got into politics.
Well, thanks. I was raised by a single mother on the Eastern Shore on the Maryland side, and started working and paying taxes at the age of 11 on a farm. And then I had pretty mediocre grades, so our family didn't have any money, so I knew that college wasn't going to be in for me, at least initially. So I looked to the military, and I think at the time, the Marines, it was in the 90s, they had the best marketing, A Few Good Men and stuff like that. So I was looking at being a Marine, and that changed when my older brother, a couple years older than me, he's influenced me a lot more than I'd like to tell him that he did. But he introduced me to the SEAL teams, the Navy SEAL teams, and I watched that cheesy Charlie Sheen movie, and then I read a couple books, and I was sold. So I went into the SEAL teams, or I went to the Navy, excuse me, and then tried out to become a SEAL, and was able to make it through, and spent over 8 years in the SEAL teams. I spent a couple years in South and Central America teaching host nation special forces, and a couple years teaching other SEALs, marksmanship and reconnaissance, and then went to Iraq as a sniper.
So when you join the Navy, can you join right as a SEAL, or do you have to be in for a certain amount of time and then you?
So in the Navy, you're allowed to do that. You're actually allowed to. There's a pipeline now. There wasn't a pipeline when I went in, but you could still go in and attempt to do it. In fact, I failed the first physical test in boot camp because I had broken my wrist wrestling in high school, and I couldn't stretch it out to do perfect push-ups because you have to do perfect push-ups. And then luckily, when I went down to the follow-on school from boot camp, there happened to be a SEAL there, and he was just training and taking a break. So I worked out with him every day until I could stretch my wrist out.
Wow.
So it could do perfect push-ups, and he made phone calls and got me orders. So I went right to Bud's basic underwater demolition SEAL training.
And then you got out of the military and then you became a small business owner?
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So while I was in the Navy, I started buying property. I bought a house when I was about 19 or 20, and then I just kept buying rental property. And my sister had moved down here, and so she was managing it. And even if I was, in Chile or Colombia or something like that, I was still able to call up, and she would take care of my rental. So I really got into real estate very early on, and even today I still have a real estate brokerage, and then we have some rental property as well too, which brings income in and allows me to play politics because I can't have a real job.
Okay, and then you decided I'm going to run for office, and how did that come about?
Sure. Well, I started to pay attention a little more, I think, in the community, and doing some charitable things, and then just looking at local politics. I started to really look at national politics and local politics, and I just felt like there was sort of a segment that wasn't being represented in the area, and I just decided to jump in and see if I could, add value to it. And I've always been good at disarming people and motivating people and sort of bringing them to your side, which I think is very important in politics.
Absolutely.
To be able to find that middle ground and then move forward with that. So I just started to look at it, and I ran. I lost a primary, and then I ran again and then won, and here I am.
Okay, so now let's talk about what is going on in Hampton Roads.
Sure.
As far as legislation that you've worked on or you're working on.
Yeah, no problem. So initially, when I started to run, there were three things that I really ran on, and that was military and veterans, economy and jobs, and education. And we can certainly go into all three of those. But one of the first legislation pieces that we worked on was about energy. So when you look at economy, let me digress for 1 second. And the biggest thing in Hampton Roads, of course, is we have a transportation, and we'll get to that in a minute, what we're doing there. Transportation's a big issue for us because we're geographically challenged. We have a lot of water here, of course, and that prohibits us from being able to bring in some very big companies to do a lot of business here. So we're constantly struggling and up against that geography to be able to get monies here, to get them access in and out of here. So transportation is a big issue. Energy is a huge issue in Virginia, and of course America in general. And then our climate for small business and how we help them out. So right off the gate, I started working on legislation to deal with natural gas. So I have this perspective whether it's local economy or world economy, comes from being a small business owner, but also I've been in many countries, and I know that we're very connected with globalization around the world and economy, and Virginia is as well too. And in order to compete globally, you have to look at regional things. And so foreign oil is something that you always hear about, that we're over in Iraq or other places fighting because of foreign oil. You always hear that. Well, the number one user of foreign oil in America are 18-wheelers and big rig trucks, and people don't realize it, but that's how most goods are moved, right? So when stuff gets shipped over and comes into the port, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, it's moved across the country with 18-wheelers. Well, they're the number one user of foreign oil. So what can we do to sort of incentivize 18-wheelers to get off of oil and diesel? Well, natural gas. We have an abundance of natural gas. You probably, and I know our listeners out there have probably heard about the Balkan Shale and America's big boom in natural gas. So right off the get-go, we started to look at how we can create infrastructure to incentivize 18-wheelers to convert from diesel or gas to natural gas, because it's cleaner burning fuel. We have a ton of it, and it's obviously it's better for the environment. And the other thing is, when you look at diesel and oil and gas prices, they're based on world markets. So there's big fluctuations. If there's an invasion in some country in the Middle East, it spikes up oil prices, right? Well, natural gas is a local market, so we control that. It's here at home, and it's more stable over the long term. So we passed a series of bills to create infrastructure to be able to incentivize these guys. And I'm happy to say and proud to say that UPS, which the company, of course, we all are very familiar with, they have announced and have started to convert 1,400 of their vehicles in Virginia, basically their whole Virginia fleet, which is millions of dollars in the economy. It's much better for the environment, and it reduces our need for foreign oil. So I'm very proud, to say that we worked on that. So energy is the first thing. I don't know if you have any questions on that.
Well, I was going to say that I love that you incentivize them instead of coming down and saying you have to do this. I mean, that's a great way to go about it, to get them to start making those changes.
That's how I believe that government should work. We should be setting conditions for the private sector to be able to thrive, as opposed to mandating what they shall do.
Right.
And we have the ability to do that. I think it's much easier to do that anyway. We touched on transportation and of course, and the port, and how vital the port is, not only to this region in Hampton Roads, but Virginia in total. So we have an advantage over all the ports on the East Coast here right now, because our port is deep. It's 50 feet deep. We have huge ships that come in here, of course, with the military, and we're ready to go for what's called the Supermax ships, which are these huge, enormous ships that are going to be coming through the Panama Canal, and we can already take them. So we have an advantage. We're trying to get to 55 feet deep, because those ships are going to be even bigger that are being made. And so I know that right now, in next session, we're discussing an investment into the port that would modernize it and allow us to move cargo faster, and also move those 18-wheelers that are coming into the port, grabbing goods and cargo and moving it across the country. We're trying to modernize it in terms of being faster with the cargo taken off the ships, but also make sure that it's easier for those trucks to get in and out of the port. So just to expedite things and make it faster. And the port is very vital to this region and Virginia. It's a huge asset that we're really blessed to be able to have. So those are a couple things with transportation and energy.
One question about that.
Of course. I could talk for all day.
I know. I love hearing that, but that brings up another question. Like, going from 50 to 55 feet, that doesn't seem like that big a deal. But I'm sure that's, what's involved with that?
Enormous amount of digging, right? So lots of digging and dredging, but it's vital for us to be able to do that, to have an advantage over other ports, to make sure that we get those enormous ships and that the cargo's coming here, because of course the more volume that we have going through this port,
Right.
the better for us in terms of economically speaking. But also we can also incentivize companies, and we can look for ways to incentivize companies to have another layer of economic activity from the port. And when I say that is, our port is mostly a pass-through port, meaning that cargo comes in here from whatever country, it gets offloaded, the trucks pick it up and they take it and they go across the nation, right? Because within a day or two's driving distance, you have most of the population of the United States. What we're looking at doing is how can we create another layer of economic activity? And what I mean when I say that is, right outside the port, along outside of Virginia, we want to create and incentivize an area to have advanced manufacturing. Or assembling. So when all those goods come over here and land at the port, let's get them assembled here too, and then ship them out, as opposed to coming here and then shipping them out. So you just create a whole nother layer of economic activity, which of course creates jobs and is good for our tax base and our economy in Virginia.
All right, we'll keep going.
We're working really hard. And
So that's the port, that's and then natural gas, and then how about legislation for small business?
all right, so we created this I know some of your viewers will be familiar with it, some of them will not. Well, there's what's called crowdfunding. And crowdfunding, to put it very simply, is just a bunch of people who are not connected coming together and funding a business or some kind of event or whatever it is they're doing. So there's some websites out there called Kickstarter and Indiegogo and GoFundMe and stuff like that, where people would put their project or their product online. If people like it, they could fund it, basically. But that doesn't allow them to have a piece of the company, have equity in their company. It's just for rewards or something like that. So current law in the United States, and actually let me digress for 1 second to give you an example of what I mean by that. So this guy, he had this cooler idea. So he took a cooler, but this cooler was not a regular cooler. This cooler had like iPhone chargers and speakers and all kinds of stuff. It was a really awesome cooler. Well, he crowdfunded $10 million. $10 million. So basically, once you gave a certain threshold of dollars, you got a cooler, right? So he created his own market almost, and these people crowdfunded his business and created his business. None of them had a piece of the business, though. They just did it as a product because they liked the product. They got a cool cooler, right? So right now, they're the only people who are allowed to crowdfund into equity are accredited investors. And what that means is if you have $1 million in your bank account or more, or you make over $200,000 per year. Well, that's not the majority of the people in America, right? And certainly not in Virginia. The vast majority of people are non-accredited investors. Current federal law says only accredited investors can crowdfund into equity, right? So what we put last year and what we passed into law was legislation that says that if you're a Virginian and you are non-accredited and you want to invest in a Virginia company, then you can do so. And basically, as a Virginian, you can invest up to $10,000 per deal per year. And if you're a business owner, you can raise capital, which is really important here because let's say here's an example. So let's say you have a coffee shop, right? You have the best coffee around. Everybody loves your coffee shop. They come there every single day to drink it. You want to open up a second location. You need $50,000. Your credit's a little bit dinged because you're in the real estate market or whatever and you got dinged. So you go crowdfund it now that this law's passed, and you go to either a website or a brick and mortar and you ask, here's my investment plan, I want the second thing, this is who I am, I want $50,000. So let's say 1,000 of your people who come drink coffee every day invest in your business. Now you have your $50,000, you can open up your second location. These people, the 1,000 people that invested into your company, actually own a piece of your company, and now you have 1,000 brand ambassadors because where are they going to drink their coffee? At their place.
In their investment.
Exactly.
Hold that thought. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing, and this is why I was so excited to have you here to share with the viewers all the things that are going on in Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads. I'm Ann Farrell Tata. We are joined by Delegate Scott Taylor from the 85th District, and if you'll stay tuned, stay with us after the break, we'll come back and talk more about what's economic issues facing Hampton Roads. Welcome back to Join Our Town. I'm Ann Farrell Tata, and we are going to continue our discussion with Delegate Scott Taylor of the 85th District in Virginia Beach. And we're talking about economic issues facing Hampton Roads, and he was in the middle of talking about crowdfunding. So please continue, and thank you again for being here.
Sure, no problem. It's great to be with you. So again, basically what the gist is that you we create this ability for a small business to be able to have access to capital, which is vital for any business to survive and thrive. So they have access to capital, and you also allow for any Virginian to invest into those companies that they love, like your coffee shop, right? So if you're able to do that and get your second location, you have your brand ambassadors, you have people who own a little small piece of the company. And one of the things that we're doing, or two things that I'm working on with my peers for the next year, is to, now that it is legal for any Virginian to invest into crowdfunding, now we're looking at public-private partnerships. So we're saying, okay, well, localities, we can allow localities to require a small piece of the public-private partnership to be crowdfunded. So, for example, in Hampton Roads, everybody knows about the arena deal, right? The arena deal and the potential for a professional basketball team or something at the oceanfront. Well, that's a public-private partnership. So let's say, for example, you had Virginia Beach said, all right, well, we want 2% of the equity to be crowdfunded into the community, right? So now if they did that, and that 2% it's not significant in terms of getting all the equity to be in there, but it's very significant in allowing people to invest in their community and be a part of it. So if you open that up, you'd probably have tens of thousands of people from around here who would give $50 or $100 or $500 towards this arena, and now it's theirs too. I mean, it's their arena, right? So you take care of the potential negative in a public-private partnership, which is, okay, this isn't transparent, or Ann Farrell's getting a deal behind the scenes or something like that. You don't have that because you literally have thousands of people who want it, and then the politicians can say, well, my people wanted it, they voted for it with their pocketbook, right? So that's one of the things that we're doing with this crowdfunding, hopefully the next session. And then the other thing is we're going to allow for crowdfunding of bonds. So, for example, here, Norfolk has a flooding problem. Everybody around here knows that Norfolk has a flooding problem. So Norfolk they have their own money and they get federal monies. Well, there's a gap, right? There's a gap for them to be able to take care of that. So if they crowdfunded with bonds, then people who live in that are affected every single day could literally chip in and be like, oh, yeah, I have flooding all the time in my place. I'll give $50 or $100 in the form of bonds, which are municipal bonds, which means it would grow tax-free. So you're investing in your community, but you're actually even getting a piece of it, right? So the same thing with the public-private partnership. On a bigger scale, and then I'm sure you want to move on. I know everyone out there, all your listeners out there, have been through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and they've probably sat in traffic, right? So you could literally crowd-fund a third crossing, and the way that you could do that is say, all right, well, the current tunnels that are there now, leave them free. Look at the other one, raise the capital, because you would have tens of thousands of people who I know I'd be one of them that would give money in the form, to invest to be able to get another tunnel, another crossing through there. And then you take the equity that's raised, and then you go to the financial markets, and you'd be able to get the money to be able, like the $1 billion to actually build it. And then you could put a toll on it. Now remember, the other two are free, but you put a toll on it, and it's based on an algorithm that's based on traffic, so that the price adjusts based on traffic. And I know there's many people out there just like me that would happily pay a couple bucks to not sit in traffic to go through that. There are dwindling budgets. It's very tough transportation. We did a great job a couple years ago in the General Assembly. I wasn't there. I can't take credit for it. But getting more money in this area to deal with transportation. In fact, this area gets almost as much money for transportation dollars as Northern Virginia, and we have way less population. So that's a big win for the legislators from around here. But there's still not enough to do things like a third crossing. So crowdfunding, potentially, people investing from their community, could be a way to be able to get some of these infrastructure projects done and allow for citizens to actually make money on doing that and then not sit in traffic.
Well, and it sounds like a win-win for everybody, and I love the idea of everybody investing in their community, which, we live here. We want to support the area
pride.
here. Yeah. I can talk about a little bit about diversifying our economy so we're not so beholden to federal spending.
That's an excellent question. It's a very big problem for Virginia. I think we're the number one recipient of federal dollars in here. So as budgets dwindle and sequestration, which is indiscriminate cuts to the Department of Defense, it really hits the Virginia economy really hard. So I remember door knocking a couple of years ago, and seeing somebody and talking to a gentleman, and he was very supportive of me, but he said, what am I going to do though? I'm getting furloughed. I'm losing $1,000 a month every month out of my paycheck. So what am I going to do with my family? I can't live here. I mean, he was distraught. So sequestration is a big deal, and it has to be dealt with on the federal level. But in the meantime, and from a long-term perspective, we have to do things that really diversifies the economy. So what do we do? Energy is certainly one. People out there I know have heard about offshore drilling and stuff like that, and that's important. I think it's important to look to make sure that it's safe, that we're not going to destroy our environment, obviously, but at the same time use our resources that we have here at home to be able to create jobs and diversify the economy. The other thing is exporting. So for every dollar that you get back when you sell something overseas, and every dollar that comes back, it's like having $4 because of what's called the money market multiplier as it moves through the economy. So Virginia is very well positioned to be able to export goods and services. We have the port. Services-wise, I mean, we have these folks that are military contractors that have been doing things overseas for a long time just for the federal government. So what we need to do is have some of these businesses transition their marketing to be able to work for private companies or governments overseas, friendly ones, of course. But most people out there don't know that Virginia actually has a department. It's called Export Virginia. And in our Virginia's Department of Economic Development, they actually have a program where Virginia has people in offices throughout the world. So, we have somebody in Santiago, Chile, and Istanbul, Turkey. But most companies and most people, most Virginians, don't know about it. So they don't even know that it exists. What we need to do is make sure that we're investing in these companies, in this Department of Economic Development, so that the person that's in Santiago, Chile, isn't just waiting to be contacted to sell something. So for example, if you sell widgets, that person in Santiago should be actively looking for buyers, and what they typically do is put people in those countries, either customers or partners, potential partners, if they're asked and tasked to be able to do that, or if there's a trip or something, an economic trip over there. They need to be funded in a way that if you're in Istanbul, Turkey, and you found, okay, we have a big buyer for a ton of widgets, we need to then go back to Virginia and say, what companies provide these types of widgets? And then reach out proactively to the Virginia companies and say, are you ready to sell overseas? And if you're not, we'll help you learn how to sell overseas, which they have that already. But they need to be proactively reaching back to Virginians and companies in Virginia to sell overseas. That's certainly one way we can diversify our economy. And we're working to be able to fund that for sure, because like we just talked about, we're the #1 recipient of federal dollars, and if we don't diversify, then we're going to have problems moving forward.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit, again, your background is military. What are you doing, or what are some of the things that affect the military and that you're doing for the military?
Sure, so that's certainly it's an excellent question. We have over 800,000 veterans in Virginia, and that's definitely something that I campaign on and I will continue to fight for. We just recently, the past session, we actually passed legislation to get the ball rolling to create a Virginia Veterans Center in Virginia Beach, which deals with sort of like a nursing home type thing for older veterans to be able to get them in here. There's a shortage of beds, but we're trying to get a center here in Virginia, which will create in itself hundreds of jobs, but also take care of our veterans. We worked on legislation to be able to give property tax relief to widows and widowers that in these two wars. Unfortunately, I know a lot of them. Then I worked on legislation and got it passed to be able to make it more efficient for overseas voters. So we always hear it's very hard for voters. If you're in a forward operating base in Afghanistan, we have to create efficiencies to make sure that your vote is counted. We have a lot of folks, a lot of Virginians who were in the National Guard who have deployed time and time again in the past decade. And we actually passed legislation that reduces the time in half. So before, the ballot would be mailed out to a forward operating base in Afghanistan. It would take forever to get there. They'd print it out, they'd get it, and then they mail it back, right? So we've created legislation that works on an electronic ballot that is sent there. So it's just instantaneously sent there, and then they still have to print it back and still have to send it back. Yeah. But it reduces the time in half. That makes
sense. I'm surprised they haven't done something like that before with all the scanned, documents and signatures and everything that they do over on electronically.
It's incredibly hard to get the ball rolling to do that, because people are rightfully so, they're worried about potentially being hacked and stuff like that. And I understand that. So we looked at putting crypto or encryption that's like military grade to be able to get it there, and that's something that we'll check every year to make sure that it's good. That's in the legislation to check that, to make sure that it's not being how do you say it, tainted or something like that.
So these are some of the bills that are going to be coming up next session.
Yep, and I'm working on, a couple of the biggest things in these two wars is post-traumatic
Right. Huge
stress
around
syndrome
here. Yeah.
and TBI, traumatic brain injury. So Virginia Beach itself has this big push for biosciences and biomedicine to be able to create jobs here, and again, to diversify the economy.
Right.
And I see bioscience and working on post-traumatic PTSD and TBI as something that could be together with that. And I think that that's a way that once we're kind of ground zero for the Navy for PTSD and TBI.
Right.
So if we're able to effectively work with researchers in bioscience to be able to deal with those types of things, it has broad applications for high school football players or people who
Right.
were in an accident that had post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we're well positioned to be able to, one, help veterans and their families, and then two, be able to commercialize that sort of technology, and which helps with, like I said, with high school football or soccer or any kind of concussions
Right.
and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So we only have a minute or so left. Real quick, can you just talk about education, what you're doing with education?
So one of the things that I'm looking at really hard is, coding is the coding, data science, and computer program. Those are the languages of the future.
Right.
So we have got to have our children at the elementary level start to learn those things to be
Right.
able to give them an advantage of everybody around the world, basically. And Virginia needs to be the first state to put coding in the curriculum in elementary, and that's something that I'm working
And
on.
it's not right now?
No, it's not. It's not anywhere in the nation that doesn't have it part of the curriculum mandatory for elementary.
So it is in junior or middle school and high schools?
Some places.
Now that really surprises me that they haven't done this before.
That is the future. So we have to have people who have the ability to code, and if you can code, you can get a job anywhere right now.
Oh,
There's such a
absolutely.
shortage.
Yeah. Well, Scott, you have made me, first of all, very excited about living in the Hampton Roads area, and I just can't thank you enough for being here and talking with us today. And is there anything that any final thought that you'd like to say to the viewers of the Hampton Roads area?
It's just a pleasure to be with you, and I love living here. When the Navy brought me here, I never left, and I love it, and I'm looking forward to helping and adding value wherever I can.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Ann Farrell Tata. You've been watching Joy in Our Town. We've been delightful visit with Delegate Scott Taylor, and we hope you'll join us next time. Thank you so much.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 927.